If you have heard of Operation Mockingbird, you have probably heard it described as the big one, the secret program through which the CIA bought, ran, and quietly controlled the American press. A single hidden hand behind the newspapers and the networks telling the country what to think. It is one of the most repeated claims in the whole literature of the Cold War, and it is the perfect place to practice the one skill this channel exists for, which is the difference between what a document proves and what a name implies. Because here is the uncomfortable fact. The Church Committee, the Senate investigation that went through the CIA's relationship with the press in detail in 1976, never found a program called Operation Mockingbird. That name does not appear in the official record the way the legend uses it. It comes, instead, from a single book published in 1979. Let me separate the two things, the documented and the legendary, because both are real in their own way, and the gap between them is the whole story. Start with what the files actually show, because it is serious, and it is not comforting. The Church Committee confirmed that the CIA had cultivated secret relationships with the American news media. By the committee's count, roughly 50 American journalists had official, but secret, relationships with the agency. Abroad, the picture was larger. The CIA, the report said, maintained a network of several hundred foreign individuals around the world who provided intelligence and at times attempted to influence opinion through covert propaganda, with access to newspapers, wire services, radio and television stations, and book publishers. That is not a rumor. That is the United States Senate in print describing a real apparatus for shaping what people read. There is also a real operation that carries the actual word Mockingbird, and the precision matters here, because this is exactly where the legend and the record blur into each other. In 2007, the CIA released a long, secret internal file known as the Family Jewels. Inside it is a reference to Project Mockingbird. But Project Mockingbird was not a media empire. It was a wiretap. Between March and June of 1963, the agency tapped the phones of two Washington columnists, Robert Allen and Paul Scott, who had been publishing classified material. The order was signed off at the very top by the Director of Central Intelligence, with the Attorney General and the Secretary of Defense aware of it. It was illegal domestic surveillance of two reporters. It was narrow, it lasted 3 months, and it is documented. That is the real Mockingbird, a wiretap, not an empire. It helps to know where the grand version comes from, because the legend did not appear from nothing. It grew around a real man and a real phrase. In the early Cold War, the CIA's covert operations were run in part by an officer named Frank Wisner, who spoke of his propaganda network with a famous, chilling metaphor. He called it his mighty Wurlitzer, an organ on which he could play any tune and have it picked up around the world. That phrase is genuine, and it tells you the ambition was real. The leap the legend makes is from a propaganda capability aimed largely abroad to a single named program controlling the American newsroom at home. That leap is where the evidence thins. Now the legend itself. The grand version, the one where Operation Mockingbird is a centralized program running the entire press, traces back to a 1979 book by the author Deborah Davis called Catherine the Great. Davis is the one who attached the name Mockingbird to a sweeping, coordinated media control operation and named specific CIA officers as its principals. And this is the part the retellings almost never include. Davis's book was sharply contested. She gave little sourcing for her central claims. She also, famously, identified the Watergate source known as Deep Throat as a CIA officer. In 2005, the Washington Post confirmed Deep Throat was someone else entirely, the FBI's Mark Felt. The historian David Hadley, who studied the press and the CIA closely, points out that the Church Committee simply did not find an Operation Mockingbird of the kind Davis described. So we have a strange situation, and it is worth sitting with it as a problem rather than rushing to a verdict. There clearly were real CIA relationships with real journalists. There clearly was a real, narrow operation called Project Mockingbird. And there is a real, sweeping legend called Operation Mockingbird, whose name and central structure come from a single, heavily criticized book. The legend is built on a foundation of true things, which is exactly what makes it so durable and so hard to pin down. The honest middle ground is the one that survives scrutiny. There is one more witness worth calling, and he is not a skeptic. In 1977, the Watergate reporter Carl Bernstein published a long investigation in Rolling Stone titled simply, the CIA, and the media. Bernstein went considerably further than the cautious Senate report. He wrote that more than 400 American journalists had, over the previous 25 years, secretly carried out tasks for the CIA. He described the agency's relationship with the New York Times as its most valuable among newspapers, and named CBS as its most useful broadcaster. He even accused the Church Committee of deliberately understating the scope to protect the institutions involved. There is a documented coda to all of this that the legend tends to skip, and it cuts against the idea of an operation still secretly running today. In 1973, the CIA director William Colby issued an instruction that the agency would no longer make clandestine use of accredited American staff journalists. On paper, that closed the relationship the Church Committee had exposed, but the committee caught the catch in it. The ban defined an accredited correspondent narrowly as someone formally on contract or carrying press credentials. Stringers, freelancers, and the people working the edges of the business were not covered. The door was not shut, it was narrowed, with the frame left standing. I want to flag Bernstein's number carefully, the way we flag every number here. The 400 figure is his reporting, drawn from his sources and his reading of CIA files, not a line the agency ever published. Take it as a serious journalist's estimate, not a settled census. But Bernstein's larger point lines up with the documented record rather than the legend. He was not describing one master program with a code name. He was describing something messier and, in a way, more troubling. A web of individual arrangements, lunches, favors, and quiet understandings that grew, in his phrase, until you had the journalist on a string. And that is the real shape of it. Not a single operation named Mockingbird pulling every lever, but a culture of cooperation between the agency and the press that was broad, deep, and largely informal. The Church Committee found the official relationships. Bernstein found the wider, looser version. The family jewels gave us the one narrow operation that actually bore the name. The grand, centralized Operation Mockingbird, the one with the ominous logo and the single hand on every newspaper, is the part that the documents do not support. Why does the distinction matter if the underlying conduct was real either way? It matters because the legend, by overreaching, actually makes the truth easier to dismiss. When the claim is that one secret program controlled all of American media, a skeptic can point at the missing program and wave the whole thing away. The careful version is harder to dismiss, because every piece of it is footnoted. 50 journalists on the record, a wiretap of 2 columnists in the family jewels, hundreds of foreign media assets in the Senate's own report. You do not need the myth. The documents are damning enough. So when someone tells you about Operation Mockingbird, the honest answer is not yes, and it is not no. It is this. There was no single program by that name running the American press. There was something quieter and better documented, a long, tangled relationship between an intelligence agency and the journalists who were supposed to watch it. The myth is bigger and simpler. The record is smaller and worse. Read it yourself in the links below. The next file is already open.